sweating.
Now Midlands Today with Nick Owen.
Hello, welcome to Wednesday's programme, The Headlines, this lunchtime. Dramatic CCTV pictures of a pensioner held at knife point in a post office raid. Upholding the tradition of celery throwing, the Chelsea fan who says it's only a bit of fun. And putting the punch back into the railways, Midlands passengers vent their frustrations. Good afternoon. A pensioner's been describing how she had a 12-inch knife held to her throat during a robbery at her local post office. The 63-year-old's attacker told staff she'd be killed unless they handed over the takings. Detectives have today released video footage of the woman's ordeal. Bob Hockenhull reports.
Margaret Walton has been going to her local post office in Harborne, Birmingham for many years, but this is one visit she'll never forget. As she was at the counter, this man held a knife to her throat and told staff he'd kill her unless they handed over money.
I was so terrified. I just kept saying, don't hurt me, I think.
The robber escaped with £3,500 and drove off in Mrs. Walton's purple Rover Metro after forcing her to hand over the keys. Detectives are convinced he'd carefully planned the attack. They hope someone will recognise him from video footage.
CCTV is invariably different and of various quality. This particular one clearly shows the facial features of the offender. He's not concealed his identity in any way, and I'm hopeful that this will identify who he is.
The robber's described as being of mixed race. He was in his late 20s, at least 6 foot tall, of medium build, and was wearing a light beige jacket. Despite her ordeal, which left her needing treatment for a slight cut to her throat, Mrs. Walton says she'll still do business at the post office.
People like them shouldn't be allowed to ruin people's lives. And I've made myself go back.
Detectives say Mrs. Walton was lucky not to have been more seriously injured, and they hope by releasing CCTV footage they can catch her attacker before he commits any more violent robberies.
Bob Hockenhull. Building engineers are investigating after a stolen car crashed into a chip shop last night. Residents living above the property were moved to a hotel overnight. It was feared the building was unsafe. Colin Rubottom reports.
It was at midnight that a Renault Megane smashed through the front of the shop. Just minutes before, it had been busy with customers, but staff had closed for the night and were cleaning up at the back. They escaped unharmed along with 3 tenants from the flats upstairs. They've now been moved to the nearby Cedars Hotel.
There was tenants upstairs in the flats, and what we've had to do is to rehouse those tenants last night and put them into an hotel for bed and breakfast, because obviously the structure wasn't safe and we couldn't afford to leave them up there. We got everybody out and left the properties completely empty and closed the road.
The car had been stolen in a burglary just a mile away. 2 youths were seen running from the scene of the crash. Police are still making inquiries. In the meantime, engineers have been called in to examine the building.
We've got a structural engineer here now trying to establish how to prop it all up and to get the car back out, obviously, for the police. The police need to get the car out of the building for forensics.
If the building can be made safe today, then it's hoped that residents will be able to return to their homes this evening.
And Colin joins us now live from the scene. Colin.
Well, after the car was stolen, it was driven along the ring road and round the roundabout, up Bewdley Road, right into the front of the Bewdley Road Fish Bar. Inspector Gary Higgins from West Mercia Police joins me here. Inspector, this must have been a terrifying experience for everyone who was still in the chip shop at the time.
Absolutely, and the consequences you could see from the building perhaps may well have been far more severe than they actually were last night.
Well, indeed, I understand that just 15 minutes before, the shop was very busy with customers.
Yes, I wasn't on duty last night, but I would assume that that time of night, yes, it was.
Now, what can you tell us about the theft of the vehicle and the incident which followed?
Yeah, some moments before the actual car crashed into the building, there was a burglary at a house just off the town centre near to where we are. The vehicle then came along the ring road at Kidderminster and then subsequently left the road and collided with the building.
And what inquiries are you making now?
Well, officers have been to the premises that were attacked where the burglary occurred. We have officers now making inquiries, and forensic officers have examined the scene. And obviously we would appeal for any witnesses that were in the area last night and may have seen the people leaving the vehicle.
OK, well, Inspector Higgins, thanks very much indeed for joining us here. And let's hope that people can come forward to help the police with this. Nick, back to you in the studio.
Colin, thank you. And just to repeat those two phone numbers, anyone who thinks they can help should call the police on 01562 820 888 or ring Crime Stoppers on 0800 555 111. Posters of a woman whose body was found beside a motorway are being put up in service stations between Birmingham and London in an effort to identify her. Police believe the woman was a drug smuggler. They say one of a number of plastic bags containing cocaine had burst in her stomach and killed her. Her body was found next to the M45 motorway near the junction with the M6 last Thursday. It's a tradition going back 20 years, but it could be under threat from the law, throwing celery. It's a trademark of Chelsea football fans, but a number of them were arrested for it during Sunday's FA Cup semi-final at Villa Park. Today, 3 Chelsea fans were bound over to keep the peace by Birmingham magistrates, who were told that celery throwing was a good-humoured tradition, the explanation for which was lost in the mists of time. Colin Pemberton reports.
Season ticket holder for 7 years and a fan for 29 years. They don't come more loyal than Charlie Driver. But his enthusiasm for the game and his club landed the fan from Gravesend in Kent in court this morning. He was one of 3 Chelsea fans arrested for throwing celery at Villa Park in Birmingham at Sunday's FA Cup semi-final against Fulham. The somewhat bizarre tradition of celery throwing is said to be about 20 years old. Pieces of celery are broken off and thrown into the air, at the same time as singing a song about celery regarded as an anthem on the terraces. The explanation for celery throwing is said to be lost in the mists of time. An unofficial Chelsea website had urged supporters ahead of the semi-final to take as much celery as they could to Birmingham on Sunday. The fans' solicitors said the semi-final was good-humoured and they were merely indulging in their celery throwing heritage. No one was injured and they weren't trying to throw anything on the pitch. Agreeing to be bound over to keep the peace, Mr. Driver was delighted that charges of throwing a missile were withdrawn.
For me to land a piece of that celery on that pitch, I think I'd join the Olympic javelin team, because you'd have to be Superman steroids to have reached the pitch. Just how trivial it was.
Greengrocers in Cardiff must now decide whether to stock up on celery for the cup final.
Colin Pemberton reporting. Rail passengers in the Midlands have been given the chance to release their pent-up frustrations with a vengeance. A giant punch ball's been installed outside one of the region's busiest stations, all part of a campaign which is calling for more investment in the railways. Our transport correspondent Peter Plisner reports.
I don't want to be late ever again.
Rail passengers hitting back after months of frustrating journeys.
They're usually late. I catch the trains every day and they're usually late. And the times when I have to stand up all the way from Coventry to Birmingham.
How do you feel?
A lot better now.
Are you frustrated about the railways?
Yeah, I am. They're terrible.
Bad journey, tell Gordon Brown.
It's all part of a major campaign highlighting a lack of investment in the Midlands rail network. One of those hitting out this morning was well aware of the problem.
We are getting a raw deal in the West Midlands. Everybody knows that we have to have the resources to upgrade the infrastructure, increase capacity.
In addition to allowing rail passengers to vent their frustrations with the punch bag, the campaign's also encouraging people to text the Chancellor on their mobile phones.
It's the first time it's been tried. It's certainly caught the public's attention, and we're just going to see what happens. We've got several thousand already collected.
The campaign's calling for money currently spent on road building to be earmarked for the railways instead.
Peter Plisner at the ringside. A hospital trust which was criticised for going abroad to recruit nurses has now been praised for the way it's dealt with its staffing crisis. Sandwell was among many trusts who said they'd been forced to look overseas because they'd had no success finding new staff here. Catherine Mackey reports.
All together at last after 2 years. Henry Fuego was among the first intake of Filipino nurses to arrive at Sandwell General Hospital in September 2000. His wife Sharon followed last year. Their 3-year-old daughter Corinne has now joined them. They plan to stay. and they plan to stay in nursing.
It's a nice country to live with, and I find the people very friendly. The hospital, the management are very supportive to us.
But while the skills of nurses like the Fuegos are being welcomed, the Royal College of Nursing will use its annual conference next week to warn that it won't solve the recruitment problems in the long run.
This is ridiculous. We've got a wonderful community out there. We need to be promoting nursing and healthcare as a career and training our own people within our own communities.
Sandwell have an initiative which is now winning praise. While retaining the overseas staff, they've developed a training scheme aimed at local people.
I think it's about creating a balance between looking at the local nurses that are available and making sure that those jobs are ring-fenced for our local community, and then looking at overseas nurses to supplement that.
The Royal College of Nursing today describes Sandwell as the most innovative trust in the West Midlands for recruitment and retention of staff. 2 years ago, there were 19 nurse staff vacancies here. Today, there are just 6. But the Fuegos are unlikely to be among the last of the overseas recruits. The